call this meeting to order this morning. Welcome everyone to our board meeting for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, Placer County Local Transportation Authority. Today is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. So are you gonna? Sure. Okay, we will begin, and Ken is going to lead us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Shall we move into roll call?
Sure.
Okay.
Broadway.
Here.
Brown. Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Jones.
Here.
Wilkins.
Present.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to item D, AB 2449. Matt?
Thank you, Director Jones. Just as far as item C, agenda review, there are no changes to that agenda item. And while I've got the mic, item D, AB 2449, we have had a change for Just Cause. So Director Dowden Calvillo is now joining us remotely, as you see. Besides that, no other changes under item D.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for not skipping item C. Okay, so we cannot approve the minutes just yet. Shall we move on to public comment?
So this is Deanne Gillick, General
yes.
Counsel. I see that board member Trini Burrs is online.
Okay.
And maybe she can confirm that. And it's my understanding that she's participating from the teleconference location noticed on the agenda from the Colfax City Hall. So with that, you will have a quorum that you can take action.
Yes, I am here.
Yep, great. And then Director Dowden Calvillo, as she's participating with a remote Just Cause purpose, she cannot take action until there's 5 board members present in a single location in the boardroom. And it's my understanding that will occur soon. And so as soon as you have 5 board members in person, then Director Dowden Calvillo can also participate in the votes.
Thank you. Thank you for that guidance.
We can do meeting procedure, or we can do...
Let's do that. Well, we're going to go with the meeting procedure first.
All right, we'll get through this. Good morning. Welcome to the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. Agendas are available outside the board chambers on the back table or on the PCTPA website. All comments from the public should be directed to the board. All speakers must speak from the podium as the meeting is being recorded. For those who are joining us by Zoom webinar, you can signal you wish to speak by clicking the raise hand button on the Zoom window. If you are joining by phone, press star 9 and staff will call out individuals who have indicated they wish to speak. If you would like to comment on an item that is not listed on the agenda, please do so under public comment listed as item F on the agenda. In addition, the Brown Act requires the public have an opportunity to comment on all items on the agenda. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. The time will be monitored, and once the yellow light appears at the podium, or for those online participants, when you hear a beep, the speaker will have 1 minute to conclude their comments. Lastly, the board asks that you consider stating your name for the record this morning. Thank you for your participation.
Okay. Shall we move to public comment? Okay, let's do that.
You can, point of order, you have a quorum with Trinity. And so it just means that Alice would not be able to vote on the approval of the minutes. So we can work in order and we can take action if you don't want to.
No, that would be fine. If we have enough to approve the minutes, council? Okay, good. Then we will approve the minutes. Has anybody reviewed the minutes?
I move approval of the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. You need a roll caller? Now, yeah, we do.
call. Broadway,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Dowden Calvia, oh, Dowden, no, sorry. Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Okay, very good. Now we'll move on to the public comment. Persons may address the board on items not on this agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone out there who would like to come forward and make a comment or ask questions? Okay, and I don't think, we don't do the online capability. Oh, okay, no one online. Okay, then we're going to move on to item G, the consent calendar. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board with one action without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen may request an item be removed from the consent calendar. Would any of the board members like to remove anything? Nope. Anyone else? Okay.
With that, I'll move approval of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Broadway.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Howdeshelt. Oh, sorry, he's not here. Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes? Or we got one?
Yes,
Okay.
motion passes.
Good, motion passes. Okay, we're going to move on to item H, the consent calendar. Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. Again, these items are routine and non-controversial and will be acted upon with one action. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen care to remove an item from the consent calendar? No? Okay, seeing none. Anyone? Okay. Do I have, bring it back to the board for action?
All right, I will move approval of the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Get this right this time. Broadway.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Burris.
Approve. Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. We're going to move on to item I, Placer County Evacuation and Transportation Resiliency Plan Consultant Contract Award. David?
Good morning, members of the board. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. We're requesting you to authorize the executive director today to execute 2 agreements with DKS Associates to prepare an evacuation and transportation resiliency planning effort. The first is a master agreement not to exceed $600,000, and then a letter of task agreement to not exceed $599,997. So, any consultant, they get you right to the upper limit of the dollars there. I do have a few slides here to kind of just recap what we're doing here and planning objectives. So, back in July, we were awarded a Caltrans planning grant for $630,000, and we had to satisfy a variety of conditions with respect to Caltrans conditional award, and that included amending the budget and the OWP, and we did that in September. The Caltrans then subsequently issued notice to proceed in November, and we issued an RFP and addendum in January. Basically, we felt that we wouldn't get good responses over the holidays, so we waited till January. And then the PCTPA board approved an authorization for the executive director to work on a negotiated agreement with Office of Emergency Services for the local funding match. And I believe the county OES is going to go to the Board of Supervisors here in May with respect to that funding agreement. We received 6 proposals, and 2 teams were shortlisted for interviews. The interview panel consisted of PCTPA staff, county sheriff, and county public works, and there was a unanimous recommendation by the selection committee to award the contract to DKS Associates, and subsequently our technical advisory committee concurred with that recommendation. So just I think I went too far. Just as a refresh of what this study will do is, it's we're looking at climate-related vulnerabilities in our transportation system. So in terms of climate-related vulnerabilities, principally wildfire, but also flooding, particularly in the southeastern part of the county, and then other extreme events will be taken into account as well. And so we'll look at evacuation scenarios under various extreme events scenarios, including concurrent and cascading events. Concurrent event is when you've got one particular disaster, and then you got another disaster, and so you have to deal with both, and they could be in the same geography. And a cascading event is, you have a wildfire, and then all of a sudden it rains, and then you get landslides. And so we're going to be looking at that as well. So there'll also be very close coordination with the Office of Emergency Services, as well as our local jurisdictions and first responders. There'll be a robust outreach effort. We'll work with various communities, including the fire safe councils. And they'll ultimately come with planning effort will result in a recommendation on transportation strategies and various projects that can improve infrastructure resiliency. And what I mean by that is that so that the infrastructure can hold up under extreme climate events, and so that you don't have to necessarily go back and repair that infrastructure. So design it in a way that it can take those events into account. And then we'll end up with a evacuation and transportation resiliency plan. This effort also will support the various local jurisdictions' general plan safety elements. The county has a sustainability plan, and the Office of Emergency Service is embarking on updating the local hazard mitigation plan. And so this will all feed into that. So it's all critical input. And additionally, there's state legislation that calls out that the county OES look at evacuation routes and potential resiliency hub locations, and so we'll be looking at that as part of this effort. And ultimately, you've got the objective here of creating a safe, sustainable, and a resilient transportation system. And so with that, just getting back to the original action here is we're recommending that you authorize the executive director to negotiate and execute 2 agreements with DKS Associates. We do have Dave Atkinson from Office of Emergency Services here. He's our partner in crime, I guess you could say, in terms of this effort. And he may want to say a few words. And then we also have Jim Dankowicz from DKS Associates, who will be the manager of this consultant effort. And I'd be glad to take any questions.
Great. Let me start by thanking Vice Chair Jones for stepping in while I had to start off a meeting earlier.
The directors, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry I didn't get this question to you earlier, David. Will this study include the 89 and the 267 corridors in Eastern County?
It's countywide, covers all Placer County.
So it would include those 2 corridors?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So that's more than the PCTPA jurisdiction, right?
But portions of 89 are in PCTPA jurisdiction, and portions of 267 are in
Yeah,
PCTPA.
and that's what I was referring to, the portions that
Yeah.
are within the PCTPA boundaries.
Okay, great. Other questions? All right, open for public comment.
Well, I have a question.
Oh, sorry, I can't see.
I know.
I mean, I can
but
see,
can't
but I
talk,
can't-
so
I don't have
you
eyes in
can't
the back
see
of
and
my
I
head
can't
yet.
talk. We're good there. I just wanted to confirm it should take about 20 months to do the plan. Is that right?
Correct. If everything goes well, yep, it's 20 months. It's October
Okay.
2026.
Great, thank you.
Sylvie, would you be my card player and let me know if somebody has their raised
Yes,
hand behind
I
me?
got you, yes.
You got me, all right? Okay, we'll open for public comment.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Dave Atkinson, Assistant Director of Emergency Services for Placer County. Just wanted to take a couple minutes and thank the team for this partnership and this opportunity. Just the opportunity to really collaborate with this team and really be able to do it so that we can really take that regional approach is really important to us. That's something that we have been striving for in OES in our recent planning efforts, is just to make sure that we are, we're not doing things piecemeal. We're looking at things holistically, county-wide, As I like to say that, we are working to align our plans both horizontally as well as vertically, so making sure that our local hazard mitigation plan and our community wildfire protection plan and plans like this are aligning not only within our specific jurisdiction, but also horizontally with our partner agencies in the region. And being able to do doing a study like this through PCTPA is just a great fit, and makes a lot of sense to me. I did also want to highlight the outreach component of this, incredibly important, that we're reaching out to our community. I think it's no surprise. I heard on a call yesterday from our planning agency folks as we're working on our general plan update that they did a survey, and 95% of respondents rated, high and medium high, their importance in evacuation planning or emergency planning and preparedness. So obviously an important topic on the minds of our constituents. So again, just want to thank for the partnership and looking forward to a great project. Happy to take any questions if there are from the county side.
Yeah, any questions? All right, thank you, thank you. Any other public comment?
Yeah, real quick. Jim Damkowicz, principal with DK Associates. Obviously support the motion. I do want to point out kudos to your staff for bringing in outside money to fund this study. And another goal of this study is to identify infrastructure improvements that will facilitate evacuation events, particularly for at-risk communities, and hopefully bring in more state and federal money to implement those improvements. So that's always a goal. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other public comment, are there any raised hands behind me? No raised hands. No other public comment online? Great. Then the recommendation before us is to authorize the executive director to negotiate and execute a master agreement and a letter of task agreement with DKS to prepare the Placer County Evacuation and Transportation Resiliency Plan. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. Roll call?
Broadway,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Burris, looks like she dropped. Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Howdy-Schelt,
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have a presentation on the countywide zero-emission vehicle infrastructure plan presentation. David, you didn't move, so why don't you go ahead and give this presentation?
Okay. So this is an informational presentation. We have Sam Porzani from ICF Consulting who will do the bulk of the presentation. We have been before the board here on a couple of occasions with respect to the contract award, which was back in December, and then we did an overview of this planning effort back in June of last year with respect to the grant award from SACOG. And at this point, we're kicking off this whole planning process, and we felt it would be a good opportunity for the board to get the board engaged in this planning effort and hear what we're planning to do. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Sam, and then I'll slide person. Here.
Thanks very much.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, there you go.
Chair and dear board members, good morning. I'm Sam Pornozeri, Senior Director of Clean Transportation Energy at ICF. We had the pleasure of working with your staff over the last couple of months and kicking off this important project. So as you can see, the title of the project is Countywide Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Plan, which, as it appears, it's about the infrastructure for electric vehicles and zero emission vehicles such as hydrogen vehicles. So let me start by saying why we're doing this. We're all living in California, and we have ambitious targets. We're considered as a leader in fighting climate change and sustainability. Back in 2020, Governor Newsom established the goal of transitioning the transportation sector in California away from fossil fuels towards zero emission, setting a goal for all cars, new cars sold in the state to be zero emission by 2035. And transitioning all medium and heavy duty vehicles to zero emission by 2045. So as a result of that executive order, there has been a series of regulations that has been adopted in California, initially with the transit buses transitioning to zero emission. That regulation was called Innovative Clean Transit. Then a regulation for truck manufacturers to sell a fraction of their products in California to be zero emission called Advanced Clean Truck Rule. Later on, establishing a regulation to requires car manufacturers to fully transition their product to zero emission, and by 2035, for some reason this got open. All right, to zero emission by 2035. That was called Advanced Clean Cars 2, and then later on, an Advanced Clean Fleet regulation to create a demand for zero-emission trucks in California, which some of your jurisdictions are also impacted by that. That regulation had three components in it: a priority fleets more than $50 million in revenue or 50 trucks; drayage fleets operating at the ports or intermodal rail yards; or public fleets. That regulation required a waiver from EPA for the two components of it, for the priority fleets as well as the drayage fleets. However, with the change in the federal administration, California withdrew its waivers, so those two components are not enforceable anymore, whereas the municipality and public fleet components is enforceable. So, with all that said, let's take a look at where the Placer County is in terms of the zero-emission vehicle adoption. I mean, as of the end of 2023, more than 14,000 zero-emission vehicles were registered in the county out of the total of 320,000 vehicles. Majority of those, roughly around 10,500, are battery electric. Around 3,600 are plug-in hybrid, and there can be argument on whether plug-in hybrids are zero emission or not, but there are sort of like in the pool of zero emission vehicles if they're being plugged in regularly. And there were 75 fuel cell electric vehicles too. But that's not the full story. Looking at the sales trend, back in 2021, only 1 out of 10 vehicles sold in the county were zero emission vehicles. And starting Q2 2023, almost 1 out of every 4 vehicles sold in the county are zero emission vehicles. And that has sustained with roughly in Q2 of 2024, that number came to roughly 1 out of every 3 vehicles sold in the county are zero emission vehicles. So this is a great progress that the county has made. The curve you can see on the right hand side has been plateaued a little bit. However, I mean, there has been a lot of market conditions over the last 2 years with the interest rates going up, with the inflation and other things that has caused a little bit of a plateau. However, as we're seeing in long term, I mean, the interest in zero emission vehicles is increasing, and a lot of manufacturers globally are shifting a lot of their products to these zero emission vehicles. So
Can I stop you for just
Sure.
a second? Just to clarify, on your graph there for the zero emission, that is inclusive of hybrid?
plug-in hybrids,
Okay.
not regular hybrids. So plug-in hybrids are
Plug-in,
like, yeah.
Which most of, I think, your hybrids you're seeing sold now are plug-in, are they not?
There are a lot of regular hybrid vehicles which basically you cannot plug in. Plug-in hybrid is basically like a battery electric vehicle that has also an internal combustion engine to extend the range.
Right.
And you can see that, for example, with Volvo XC90, there's a plug-in hybrid version of those. Like Chrysler Pacifica is a plug-in hybrid. But those are the ones that are being counted. But if you're talking, for example, about a RAV4 hybrid or a Toyota Camry hybrid, those are not counted as zero-emission vehicles.
Okay, so it is a plug-in. I'm not seeing many of the non-plug-in. Of course, Prius was our first
Right,
introduction to that non-plug-in, but you've seen a much higher transition to the plug-in hybrid. I know my daughter bought a Jeep Grand Cherokee plug-in hybrid, so very familiar with that vehicle itself. So I was just wondering on those numbers if that is how that's being counted. So it has to be a plug-in hybrid, but it's still counted as a zero.
That is correct. That is correct. That is correct. However, as you can see on the left-hand side, I mean, majority of that 14,000 were pure battery electric vehicles, not plug-in hybrid, but yes.
Okay, and are you tracking that as well on a year-to-year basis? Similarly, on the left-hand side of the graph to what the number is versus your plug-in hybrid versus?
We do have that number. It's not shown on the right-hand side chart, but we do have that number on, like, in terms of sales, like how many are plug-in hybrid versus the pure battery electric vehicles.
It would be interesting to see how that is trending as well, as you see that somewhat decline in just the overall percentage, but also are you seeing more of the plug-in hybrid versus the pure electric vehicle, just due to some of the challenges in, we're seeing less production on the full electric?
Absolutely. And I can tell you, like, I mean, if you look at the long term, plug-in hybrids are getting less traction. I mean, they are moved toward more larger vehicles because those are the vehicles that are a little bit harder to be purely battery electric. And most of the sedans and smaller SUVs are fully shifting to pure battery electric vehicles. And if you think about it from the economic standpoint, having two type of powertrains on a vehicle is probably less economic for a manufacturer than having one single powertrain on the vehicles. That has been the shift. Our long term, as we get to the harder to make it battery electric vehicles, and especially for consumers who are demanding 500-mile range, 600-mile range type of vehicles, those will be the consumers that probably kind of have a preference over plug-in hybrids.
Thank you.
All right, so it's incomplete to talk about zero emission without talking about infrastructure. So as of very recently, as at the time that we actually pulled this data, there has been more than 570 ports, charging ports across the county. One of the metrics that are typically being used to assess like the accessibility of chargers, and it's not always a great metric, is the number of electric vehicles per ports available. So how many electric vehicles are registered in the county, how many ports are in the county, and how does that compare to other counties in the state? So among the 59 counties in the state, Placer County ranks 44th in terms of the electric vehicles per charging port. That means there are more electric vehicles than charging ports available. This is not always meaning that EV charging infrastructure is inaccessible in the county. It really depends on how many people have access to home charging and how many people are really in need, or EV drivers are really in need of public charging infrastructure. Most of these EV chargers, as you see on the map, are within the urban areas in the southwest region of the county. Rural areas have limited charging infrastructure. There are quite a bit of the blue, the blue squares are representing DC fast chargers, and the orange circles are representing the level 2 chargers. Level 2 are slow chargers, DC fast chargers are fast chargers, basically. 70% of these DC fast chargers are Tesla superchargers, which used to be only for Tesla, but now are opening to other manufacturers as well. And currently, there's no charging infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles in the county, nor any hydrogen fueling infrastructure. So those 75 fuel cell electric vehicles that are registered in the county are probably fueling in the Sacramento area or somewhere else. So because of all of these, because of the trends we're seeing, all the regulations in California, and all the incentives in California that are pushing towards zero emission vehicles, we really need a robust charging infrastructure. 10 years ago, the question was, we need the vehicles on the road and the infrastructure will come. And now the problem is that we need the infrastructure in order to get the vehicles on the road too. So having a robust EV charging infrastructure, hydrogen fueling infrastructure, if there are a place for hydrogen in some of the sectors of the transportation, is really important. So that's why we started this study with several different objectives. First, identifying the gaps in the infrastructure in the county, in the Placer County. Assess the capacity of the electrical grid system. With electric vehicles, it's not anymore that whether we have gas stations or not, we really need to tie the energy system to our transportation system, and both of those needs to work hand in hand in order for this to work out. And then looking at all of that, looking at disadvantaged communities, which often do not have access to home chargers sometimes, There are rental communities, there are multi-unit dwellings and et cetera that do not have access to home charging, trying to figure out where and how we can make charging accessible to them, and creating a plan that basically try to look at over the next 10 or 15 years on how the county can develop its zero-emission vehicle infrastructure, but most importantly, what are the baby steps we can take? What are the pilot projects we can take to start mobilizing this? So this is not really a plan just for the sake of a plan, but is a plan to get us started on implementation. And that's why the last piece, the last objective here is one of the core objectives of this project, which is to identify projects that Placer County and its partners, Placer County TPA and its partners, can actually go after funding and start mobilizing these projects to be able to start scaling it up for full development of this infrastructure over the next 10 and 15 years. So to do this work and to do this planning work, we're conducting 3 phases. Phase 1 is data collection, information gathering, working, understanding how many vehicles, where those vehicles are, who owns those vehicles, where the infrastructure is, what type of infrastructure, who owns those infrastructure, and also like what are the policies and programs, federal, local, regional, statewide, utilities, who's doing what. Then phase 2 really gets into conducting scenario planning, looking into the future, what level of adoptions are we expecting, where those adoptions are we expecting to happen. And with those adoptions, where the demand is. Knowing the demand, where is suitable to put those infrastructure, and doing siting analysis. Demand doesn't always equal suitability of having infrastructure. You can have a region with very high demand, no grid capacity, and having the grid capacity could take 10 years, so you have to rethink of where to put the infrastructure in order to meet that demand. So doing that siting analysis and trying to prioritize at the macro level and micro level, trying to prioritize regions within the county that needs charging infrastructure most suitable for development of the charging infrastructure. That's one piece of it. The second piece is trying to help the municipalities and public fleets within the county to transition and lead by example in terms of the transition to electric vehicles, and also in response to the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation, which is now solely focused on the municipality and public fleets. So as part of that, we're also helping the municipalities and county and whoever, all the jurisdictions that are subject to this regulation to transition their fleet to electric vehicles, and most importantly, what type of charging infrastructure or zero emission vehicle infrastructure they will need. And phase 3 comes, will respond to the core objective of this project, which is implementation and pilot projects. Knowing where the demand is, where the charging needs to go, where the hydrogen fuel infrastructure needs to go, trying to identify pilot projects that line up with the fundings that are available at the state, and who knows, maybe at the federal level. And trying to figure out how we can line up these projects with those so that these pilot projects that are being developed as part of this project could be put into the funding application and be mobilized using the funding that are available to the state. So let me give you a little bit a quick overview of these 3 phases. As I mentioned, the data collection piece is really around, 3 components: understanding policies and programs, local, regional, state, and federal level. Understanding the existing vehicle and infrastructure, and when I say infrastructure, not just charging and hydrogen infrastructure, but also the grid and capacity and grid infrastructure available throughout the county. And also the third component is really travel behavior, how people are traveling within the county. There's a lot of through traffic, a lot of these zero emission vehicles that are passing through the county. How can the county meet the demand from those vehicles? How people within the county are traveling, what are the seasonal variations, what are the weekday, weekend variations, and trying to understand and then tie that to where the demand for the charging infrastructure, hydrogen fueling infrastructure is. Phase 2, as I mentioned, is really around scenario planning and technical analysis. First piece of it is around public infrastructure, doing projections around EV adoption with respect to policies, with respect to market, and doing siting analysis and creating mapping tools that tells us where we need to focus on with respect to infrastructure development. The second part of it is public fleet transition planning, which is helping the municipalities and jurisdictions within the region to transition their own fleet to EVs or zero-emission vehicles, and establishing the necessary infrastructure for powering them. And the third is really around implementation and pilot projects. Doing all of that technical analysis on trying to identify up to 3 pilot projects. These could be a hydrogen filling infrastructure, a public infrastructure, or a public fleet transition. Identifying all the components, all the details of those pilot projects, really down to electrical design of it, and trying to identify funding programs that align with those pilot projects, creating the projects in a way that they can be literally copy and pasted into the funding applications in order to get the necessary grant to mobilize them. So how can we call success? What we will call success. Our success out of this project is to make sure, one, at the end of this project, our recommendations will lead to an equitable zero-emission vehicle access. Access to charging or fueling infrastructure, especially for those low-income communities who may not have access to home charging. And in order for them to transition to clean mobility options, they need access to charging or hydrogen fueling infrastructure. Scalable implementation, laying out an implementation plan that is scalable, and identifying the pilot projects that really gets us on the path to that scalable implementation by 2035, 2040 timeframe, when we want to transition majority of the vehicles operating within the county to zero-emission vehicles. In doing that, we are planning to conduct this project over a course of 18 months, between February of 2025 and August of 2026. Majority of the work going to be done over the next 8 months. The technical work will be done over the next 8 months. Over the course of this project, there will be public and community engagement, where at every step of this project, whether from the data collection, whether it's going through the siting analysis, going through the pilot projects, and going through the draft plan, we will have community engagement, stakeholder engagement, focus groups, working with utilities, working with the private sector, and working with communities to make sure their inputs are being baked into our plan. And then we leave the 2026 really to work with you, to work with jurisdictions around the draft plan and make sure the draft plan is meeting everyone's need. And with that, I will conclude my presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, I have a question of staff. So in staff report, it said the planning area is anticipated to be completed by July 2025, which seems, if you could show that.
That's an error.
26.
2026, yeah.
Because, I forget we're in 2025 as well, so.
Yeah, I did too.
Sometimes, sometimes I just go, whoops. All right, so thank you. I
Good
appreciate
catch.
that. Man, there could be a lot of questions on this, so let's keep questions to, question period to 45 minutes on that? No. Dan, do you have questions?
I saw there was a portion related to local land use planning.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have in mind for that? And what comes to mind for me as it relates to electric charging infrastructure is there are some land use types where integrating electrical charging infrastructure makes a lot of sense, and there's others probably not so much, right? Like a McDonald's, probably not so much. It's designed for fast turnover. An office complex, probably much more compatible because it provides charging opportunities for people who may be going to a single location and staying there for a long period of time. What do you see that portion of the report containing?
Great question, and something that we actually have been working in the last 2 weeks with the staff. To really flesh out what this component of the plan should look like. And as you rightly said, it is really trying to figure out, with the charging infrastructure, or in general with the zero-emission vehicle infrastructure. I don't want to ignore hydrogen whenever I say EV infrastructure, but trying to really rethink how we're doing the land use planning with this new infrastructure. So it used to be with the gas station. I mean, we had gas cars, and gas stations could be at their own locations, and everyone going there, fuel up for 5 minutes. Now it's not the case. We need to be able to sometimes plug in our vehicles for 2 hours, and no one really want to sit in their car doing nothing for 2 hours. So trying to think about how our land use planning needs to change in order to bake this infrastructure into it. What are the sort of like land use types that are more suitable for charging infrastructure deployment? What are land use types are more better for level 2 charging versus DC fast charging? For example, you mentioned McDonald's, or let's say like Whole Food is a great example that, I mean, has been one of the front runner of putting the charging infrastructure. People go Whole Food, they spend 30 minutes shopping, 45 minutes shopping. That's a great place for DC fast charging. Whereas in a park or a library where people probably spend 2 hours, 3 hours of time, those are more suitable for level 2 charging. Why level 2 charging and not everything being DC fast chargers? Our grid has constraints, and DC fast chargers are expensive, are not economic. I mean, if you go to a DC fast charger today, I actually was on a DC fast charger yesterday, I had to pay 70 cents a kilowatt hour. That's way more expensive than paying gas today. Whereas at a level 2 charger, you can spend like 20 cents a kilowatt hour, like almost like 1/3 of that price. So really trying to rethink of like how we were looking at land use before, and now with this infrastructure in place, how this land use planning needs to change. What are the more suitable land uses for establishing? And part of that land use also going to be baked into our siting analysis. We're not going to necessarily like have the charging infrastructure at every different land use types. We will try to have some exclusion. We heard in my past experience working with a lot of other communities in other jurisdictions, there are communities that are concerned that charging infrastructure in their communities will become vehicle magnets, or for example, truck charging infrastructure will become a truck magnet. And yes, it will bring zero emission trucks in their communities, but it will impact their safety. So trying to really think about all of that as part of the siting analysis and land use planning is important.
And just to follow up, would you see the possibility of identifying incentives to encourage, private property owners to install either as part of building new projects or as a part of retrofitting existing buildings, where it's a compatible land use type, to try to encourage uptake of EV charging on private property that's not commercially available? It may be more focused on tenants of a building or those types of things.
Yes, there are incentives right now available at the state level. I mean that for private properties for depot charging, or like even for fleets to install chargers, and that pays for the hardwares. But there are also non-monetary incentives also that will be highlighted in this report. There has been a lot of businesses that have reported by putting charging infrastructure at their places. They're seeing a lot more, they're taking a lot more businesses and more like there are people who are going to Whole Food, for example, to charge their vehicle. Otherwise they were going to like Safeway or other places. So yes, there are non-monetary incentives that will be highlighted here. There are monetary incentives that are available at the state level. There are a lot of public-private partnership models available that are now being explored. In terms of revenue sharing, some of these charging infrastructure at the private properties could bring more revenue to that business as well if they are being publicly available. For multi-unit dwellings, sometimes it might be a little bit difficult to justify that for the property owner. However, there are also like codes and building codes that requires new development to have access to chargers or being EV ready, depending on the number of parking. So there are both regulations as well as incentives that are pushing, but you're absolutely right. We need to also identify like what type of incentives, additional incentives will be needed to really get there.
Yeah, and I think what I had in mind were monetary incentives that local agencies who have land use control or land use approval authority could potentially adopt that may encourage, private parties to install EV infrastructure.
Like churches or something like that.
Could be that, or it could be, again, there could be I know some agencies allow higher density on projects that provide some degree of public benefit. And, if putting EV charging in your parking lot for some spaces on an office building allows you to get more square footage, another floor on your building or whatever it may be. There could be incentives like that are non-monetary to the local agencies, but that may have monetary value to the property owner that could kind of encourage uptake of EV charging as well. And hotels, yeah. And so I think that's an area where there's a lot of potential if it's kind of really thought through in terms of where is there potential upside to the private sector that can be provided by the public sector other than direct cash incentives to help the cause of advancing EV charging.
I think that's a great idea, and yeah, we'll definitely explore that.
Yeah, and so this will come back to us for a public hearing and public input.
Yes.
To drive at exactly those types of things, to make sure that in your outreach, there was, something that was not overlooked that's unique to Placer County, so. Ben, do you have?
Yeah, this is a little outside of what we've been talking about more when it comes to just smaller cars and whatnot. What kinds of considerations have you made for larger vehicles like garbage trucks or that kind of a thing as far as infrastructure goes, because.
Well, you can come on down to Roseville and we'll charge your hybrid garbage trucks, because we've got that. Right, Jason?
We'll have to charge them, but okay.
We'll charge them to charge, right?
Well, I'm talking
So
about
we do,
infrastructure.
yeah. What's that?
Talking about the infrastructure as far as.
Oh, okay, we've got the infrastructure for buses and,
Well, I'm sure you do.
well, come on down.
So,
We'll cut
Director
you a
Brown,
deal.
we do have a component within this planning effort that looks at fleet infrastructure, public fleet infrastructure. So we'll work with all the municipalities here and assess where they are with respect to transition plans, and then provide whatever assistance we need to do. And of course, then the jurisdictions can piggyback on this effort and take it the next step in terms of detail. So, I did want to point out, Director Wilkins, that the county and the city of Auburn are updating their general plan. So the land use part will actually play an important input to those planning efforts. And then the state also has legislated over the past couple of years various streamlining for permits. And of course, our jurisdictions are in various states of compliance, and so once again, we'll assist the jurisdictions to get everybody fully complied.
Director Brown, did you get your question? Yes, so sometimes my banter gets in the way.
Well, I was also going to ask about fire trucks. Do you do that?
Why don't you go ahead and do that? Yeah. You want to ask that question?
Yes, please.
So this plan will address the charging infrastructure as well as the hydrogen filling infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles, whether that is for public, charging infrastructure, or for municipalities, fleet charging, or zero emission vehicle infrastructure needed. So part of this, and we have done this in other places, with the ACF now sort of like being on hold, there is a little bit more uncertainty in terms of the future of zero emission, medium and heavy duty vehicles. It's not necessarily like whether it's going to happen or not, because it's most likely going to happen. It's just like when this is going to happen and how long it will be delayed. However, yes, we are working on, as part of this project, not only light-duty vehicle infrastructure, but also heavy-duty vehicle, medium and heavy-duty vehicle infrastructure as well, identifying where the charging needs to go for heavy-duty vehicles. Charging infrastructure will be most likely either 350 kilowatt chargers or megawatt chargers, especially for long hauls. That will be heavily going to depend on the grid capacity available.
Right.
Sometimes utilities to bring a megawatt of power, it could take 5 years. Sometimes for 3 or 4 megawatt of load, it could take 10 years.
Right.
So trying to really think it strategically of where those infrastructure needs to go, and whether with the medium and heavy duty vehicle, the problem also is that, I mean, every minute of waiting is a loss of revenue. So trying to think about like where the charging strategically needs to be placed so that it could be opportunity charging. Like there's a truck stop. I mean, the driver was going to stop there for restroom break or lunch or whatever. Can we put the charger there in order for that truck to be charged? Same thing with for the fleets, for the municipality fleets. We are doing a lot of that. I mean, we've been helping like 20 municipalities in California in doing that, and are about to start with working with City of Rockland to, in process, we're working with City of Rockland to actually also establish and work through like what that infrastructure is going to look like for them for charging both their light duty vehicle as well as medium and heavy duty vehicles.
I want to make sure I'm current on the advanced clean fleet rule.
Sure.
It does not apply to public fleet. I mean, the exemption no longer applies. I mean, still apply.
It still applies to municipalities.
Right. It didn't get, right, in the private sector, that got suspended, but the
That is
public-
absolutely correct. There was no waiver, there's no EPA waiver required to enforce the ACF on public fleets. That's why
Okay.
public fleets was
Good.
not in the waiver
Just-
yet.
Just tell me that I remember correctly, and I'm good. You good? Director Jones, Vice Chair, all right. Director Broadway, you got your plug-in hybrid question answered, you good?
I've got that answered. I'm pretty good. One question in your analysis, we recently went through the procurement process for some of our fleet vehicles, and the attempt was made to purchase appropriate vehicles to replace those items. Was not available
Yes.
based on needs. So we're running head-on into a requirement where there's no availability of the necessary equipment. So is that going to be part of your analysis and how we're flexing to address that availability?
So for your city, yes, because we're doing
We're doing
a
the
separate
study.
work with your city, or we're planning to start a separate work with your city. But in general, as a general answer, I mean, full disclosure, I was with the California Air Resources Board before joining consulting, was part of actually writing up the ACF regulation too. So there are exemptions in the regulations and flexibility in regulations. One of the flexibility in the regulations is technology exemption, which means that if you have a certain vehicle type with a certain duty cycle that currently is not available in the market, you can apply for that exemption to CARB. There is a process that basically you send an email with a memo, get two, codes from manufacturers that they don't offer that. CARB will process that within 30 to 90 days and will let you know that you're exempt. Plus, there is also a list right now published by California Air Resources Board in terms of the type of vehicles that currently there's no EV equivalent available for them. So, I mean, some of your, vehicles, like for example, I'm not sure if you have a digger derrick or if you have a vac truck or sword truck. If you have a sword truck right now, sword trucks, there's no EV equivalent available for them. The chassis itself is available. However, once you put the vac equipment on it, it's so heavy that the vehicle goes above 82,000 pounds and cannot be driven on California roadways or anywhere else. So that's why there are exemptions in the regulation for some of those. However, if you have an F-150, that is not exempt. So you have to go to, you should buy a Lightning or F-250. There are some equivalent for that in the EV market.
We are showing our brains off again today, aren't we? Anything else?
So,
Because
just
we don't
last
check
question.
online, right?
In looking at the alternatives, When you think about the process of accessibility, the rapid charging, hopefully between the grid being able to support it, which is alarming to me that we seem to try to put, get the cart before the horse, which is always a dangerous way to go. But when you don't have an infrastructure that can support it, is really that fast charge is what's necessary if you want to get the people to embrace the solution. And the best way to do that on that fast charging is to make it readily accessible. Well, how do we fuel today? We go to gas stations.
Right.
So is the focus on looking at those areas such as your existing fueling stations, which if you have this move away from actual fossil fuels to electric, they're readily accessible, they're right off the highway, they're located everywhere. The inclusion of the charging, and you have some of that now, but not to the level necessary. Is that part of the analysis that's being done and incorporating those discussions into, this comments we made about private property, incorporating those discussions?
Absolutely. I mean, we'll be looking at, the example of fast charging and utilizing, available infrastructure that are close to highway, just like how the NEVI, the National EV Infrastructure, funds that or grants that were part of the bipartisan infrastructure law was designed, trying to keep it within 5 miles from the major corridors for fast charging will be a consideration. We also going to be looking mainly also at the fact that one of the hesitancy of the private sector to invest. At the end of the day, private sector needs to invest into these infrastructure, and it cannot all be paid by the public and the government. So the hesitancy is the return on investment. So we have to make sure the chargers are going where there is a return on investment, there is enough utilization. Today, if you look at all the gas stations in the country, there are a lot of those that are just living based off of the convenience store they have, not necessarily based on the gas they're selling. So as a result of that, we have to be strategic on placing charging infrastructure where we know that at least in the near term, there is enough return on investment with the help of the government, like programs like low carbon fuel standards and incentives that governments are providing, but it does provide that ROI to attract the private investments. Great. Some of those could be the existing gas stations, and some of those could be the other lands that could be, having a lower lease rates or, lower price for development of the charging infrastructure, or requires less, electrical upgrades.
Again, you'll bring this back. We'll know when we know, right? So.
Right.
Sylvia, anybody, Trinity, or okay? All right. Open it up for public comment. Close public comment. This is an information item. As you can see, we are very, very interested in this item. So
That's great.
all right. Thank you.
All right.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we are going to have a celebration. Next item is Highway 49 Sidewalk Gap Closure Project presentation, and I saw a Caltrans memo this morning, or yesterday, and yeah. Rick Carter.
You did in fact see a press release. Good morning, Chair and Board. This is an information presentation on the Highway 49 Gap Closure Project. It did start construction this week. We thought this was a good opportunity to provide kind of an overview of the scope, cost, and schedule of the project. I think it's been around for a while. We've had some changes on the board. As the chair noted, Caltrans press release went out yesterday. There was also publication in the, in the Gold Country media. I believe that went out on Monday, either Monday or Tuesday. Also a notice of the start of construction of this project. Kind of big picture overview. Over on the right, it shows the corridor, existing sidewalks in yellow. The blue is the proposed. The real goal of this was to construct, it's about 2 miles of sidewalk between Fulweiler and Dry Creek to basically fill in gaps. There are spots where there is no sidewalk on either the right or left, kind of east or west side. So this project will create sidewalk. It's not right and left full distance, but there is one side or the other, kind of create a contiguous path. A little reminder, PCTPA received grant funding for this, so we were responsible for the design and the right-of-way acquisition. It is Caltrans right-of-way. We also aren't really positioned to do construction, so we had an agreement with Caltrans that they would advertise and award the construction contract and administer the construction. Kind of going into a little more detail on the scope. Besides the 2 miles of sidewalk, there is a retaining wall up at the north end near Dry Creek, as well as a pedestrian bridge over Rock Creek. We're also doing some modifications to some of the signals, adding crosswalks, pedestrian heads, ADA improvements, things of that nature. Also, there's a huge amount of PG&E gas and electric utility relocation work, about $3.5 million worth of that work, as well as work to relocate some AT&T communication vaults. It's not really noted here, but we do have one Placer County sewer manhole that we are modifying. So I got some just kind of photos of the site and how things are changing. So left side is near Edgewood Road, the right side is near Shale Ridge, and you can see this kind of existing conditions and how it's not really conducive to pedestrians at the moment. This is another couple of photos near Bell Road. So this was part of the early environmental work that we show kind of a rendering over on the right of the after condition. I would note, you look at this photo, on the right you can see kind of the Sharrow and the bike lane. This whole corridor has existing bike lanes on it already, and so we are neither adding nor removing any bike lanes. It's all pedestrian work. It's just kind of a little change in the graphic. Up at the north end of the project, I mentioned there's a retaining wall that is near the Elders Senior Citizen Mobile Home Park that's just south of Dry Creek Road. This is where the kind of substantial retaining wall is being constructed. You can see on that picture on the left, there's not a lot of room there. This section of 49 is slated to ultimately be 6 lanes wide. It's currently 4 lanes wide, so that retaining wall is going in the ultimate condition so that it's not kind of a throwaway retaining wall at some point in the future. So there will be, this picture kind of shows a little grassy area. The reality is with the project that's going to be decomposed granite. So the sidewalk will be kind of pushed back from the road to allow for a future expansion to 6 lanes. Just south of Loxley is Rock Creek. So there's a bridge over that creek. It is also sort of an impediment to pedestrian access and crossing, so we're putting in a separate pedestrian bridge at that location. And these are kind of some early renderings from the environmental process. This slide is really kind of a picture next to the bridge. You can see that location. Really, it's just sort of a reference. I pulled this picture is similar to the pedestrian bridge that'll go in. So it'll look quite a bit like this when that bridge is in place and constructed. I mentioned there's substantial utility work, so the red on the right kind of shows where the utility work is kind of scattered everywhere, but it is essentially everywhere we're doing sidewalk work. Oh, I jumped a little too far ahead. In terms of right-of-way work, again, the kind of the issue with all the sidewalk infill projects is you run into a lot of folks right away. We had to do 5 permanent acquisitions in order to put the sidewalks in. We also have 34 temporary construction easements, so a whole lot of right-of-way work. And as I noted, kind of covered under right-of-way is that PG&E, AT&T, and the county sewer utility relocation work. In terms of budget, this is a $20 million project. It's quite pricey for sidewalk, but there's a lot that goes into this. You know, as I mentioned, we have the retaining wall. We have about $3.5 million in just hard utility relocation costs. On the revenue side, budget's $20.1 million. Almost $14.5 million came from a state active transportation grant that PCTPA acquired a number of years ago. It's about $5.5 million of other federal grant funds, only about $200,000 in local LTF funds. So we, substantially leveraged those local dollars. Fortunately for all of us, the bids came in low. So on the expense side, we're actually looking at about a $19.2 million cost, assuming construction goes as planned. Kind of a breakdown of the cost there in terms of design right away, the construction cost with 5% contingency at about $12 million. The very last item there is $700,000 for a Safe Routes to School program. That is a common component that goes along with the ATP grants. It is a kind of an educational program. So this was a 4-year education program at 6 of the local schools regarding kind of training and education for the children on safe walking and biking. And that was provided. We made arrangements with the Placer County Public Health Division to do all that work. And that was all completed in 2023. And lastly, schedule, as I mentioned, work started Monday night. That first section of work they're doing is near Fulweiler and Elm. Contractor's plan, when that's complete, is kind of jump up from there over to Bell Street and do the work there. I don't have specifics on where they're going after that. They're going to kind of see, I think, how timing goes. The work at Rock Creek Bridge has to be done for environmental reasons between June and September. So I think they'll probably look at the timing and how that fits and maybe jump to that location. The contracts, it's 200 working days, and that excludes any kind of weather-related delays. So the ultimate schedule is really kind of tied to what the winter season looks like, and is it very rainy, is it not so rainy? So with that, we're assuming a summer 2026 completion, but that could be earlier or later depending on winter. The other kind of risk factor is the work on the bridge. There is a main PG&E gas supply line at Dry Creek that's at the bridge, and that gas line has to be disconnected prior to the bridge work, and then when the bridge is completed, reconnected. And they can kind of shut that down in the summer months, but come winter, they really need that for everyone's heating supplies. So that's a critical component. We're going to be paying a lot of attention to that and the timing of that. And that's completes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has them.
Let me start off with a question. SACOG's going through a process on mobility zones. Do they know about this? Because this area, as I recall, is identified as one of their 10 phase 1 projects. Do they know about this?
That's that's a good question. We will make sure that they do.
I will make sure Kathleen Hanley knows that you're already creating the mobility.
Yeah, and I mean, Kathleen is aware of this just from her time here, but it's a good reminder to make sure that they're aware this is going and clear on the scope.
Okay, thanks. Questions? Yes, Dan.
Not a question, just a comment. It's very impressive, the amount of outside funding that you're able to acquire for this. With basically the entirety of the project being funded through the state and federal funding sources. So that's great.
Yeah, thank you. We're
Any other
happy to have it work out that way.
Any other questions? All right, open it for public comment.
No, I do. I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
So, thank you. So, I wanted to ask, for the part that's within the city limits of Auburn, are you putting a sidewalk on both sides from Elm to Palm, or just on one side?
Go back a couple. So, any of the ones that have there, that works. So it's maybe a little hard to see at this scale. There is sidewalk going in on both sides. It's pretty much the full length on the east side, and then there's existing section on the west side, and so there's a piece on the west that's going in.
So in the city limits from Elm, we go past Palm, but I'm just saying from that Elm to Palm, it's going to be on both sides. So
correct.
Where the Ace Hardware is and the grocery outlet and the Dutch Brothers on the other side, there will be sidewalks on both sides?
Correct.
Okay. And then the other question is just at one point we kind of talked about an opportunity to put some irrigation in there. just drop a line or allow us to drop a line while construction is happening, because we'd like to be able to sometime improve that landscape. And it would, when they're over there digging it up and stuff, it would make sense if we could drop some irrigation in then. Is that like too far gone now?
I can talk. We may be able to basically change order that in. It's not, the reality is to drop in a little bit of conduit to get it underneath the sidewalk, not a huge expense, so.
Okay.
We'll
Yeah,
make note.
because I think we just were trying to do something, especially for that part, that corridor from, like I said, Elm to Palm in particular.
Yeah, so we'll.
Okay,
we'll have
thank
some-
you.
We'll have some discussions over that.
Great. Thank you, Alice. Open it for public comment. Close public comment. Thank you for the information item. Thanks for this momentous day that is 5 years in the making. Right?
Long time.
Long time. All right. Great. That moves us to the executive director's report.
Oh, good morning, yep, still morning, okay. Good morning, everybody. Before I get into what's on the slide, I want to note, you heard 3 presentations this morning. You heard our evacuation, transportation, resiliency planning effort that's going to get kicked off, what we call ETERP. You heard from David and Sam about ZEV, and then you just heard from Rick about sidewalk. And while really ETERP and ZEV is really about sort of future-proofing us and getting us ready for the future, whether that's new sources of funding or projects to make our infrastructure sort of more in line with the 21st century, or more resilient. And then, the sidewalk is really about, I don't want to say moving backwards, but sort of some of our more basic stuff about filling in these gaps and helping our existing communities. What all these 3 things share is it's really an attempt to help our most at-risk folks, and our most, the folks who sort of need this infrastructure the most, and sort of like the ZEB stuff, as Sam noted and David noted. We know that the vast majority of folks are going to, buy their EV. They're going to go down to the Roseville Auto Mall or somewhere else. They're going to buy it for full freight and plug it in at home. But there's a lot of folks in all of your communities who can't do that, either because they live in apartments or they don't have access. They don't have capital access to afford that on the front end. And so when David and I were sitting around this grant application and thinking about it, one of the things we wanted to do was figure out, how do we help those folks inside of our communities who just, who are sort of below market and aren't going to be able to do that, for themselves. And that's really, I think, the point, one of the major points of the ZEV work and the ETERP and the sidewalk. So the thread that winds through all of those presentations is, this agency trying to do our very best to help our most sort of dependent people meet some of those transportation solutions that they wouldn't be able to achieve just in the market alone. So just a quick comment there. As far as my executive director's report, I'll give you some updates on the BUILD grant. You know that we're working on that. I will let you know that Secretary Duffy from the USDOT presented to the Senate EPW committee about a week and a half ago and noted there was 3,200 Biden-era grant applications that his department was working through. He made the comment several times that his former predecessor, Secretary Buttigieg, really did a lot of, and his comments were, they made a lot of announcements, but they didn't get a lot of these, grant awards signed. And so they're now having to work through those. I think what you can take away from that is, it just might be a minute. The USDOT is behind in what they were trying to do, and I only bring that up as it might affect, when we hear or what we hear relative to the BUILD grant. So just keep that in mind. Federal transportation reauthorization, it's very likely that the Congress is going to move very rapidly on reauthorization due to what's going on. And this is a politically neutral comment, but the fact of the matter is the Republicans are very afraid they will lose the midterms, and they want to get this federal bill through before that potentially happens. So regardless of what one thinks about that, the impact of that is the Congress is going to move very swiftly with federal reauthorization on the transportation bill. And we are working with Congressman Kiley's office on several different proposals for language to be put inside of reauthorization that would be beneficial to PCTPA in Placer County and all of our jurisdictions. One other thing, hot off the press, I wouldn't overly react to this, but sharing in real time, this came in late last night, is that there may not be earmarks in reauthorization. So we will see. That is just sort of what's going around the hallways right now up on Capitol Hill as of last night. I don't have more than that, but it's just a reminder of how fluid everything is right now in DC. Placer Sac Gateway Solutions for Congested Corridors program, just an update there. The only new thing in bold that you didn't hear last month is that James Corliss and I together briefed CTC Chair Grisby on April 4th. I do believe he sees the value in that bundle of projects, which includes, it's about 29 million for projects inside of Placer County, including projects in Rockland, Roseville, and Lincoln. Item 4, State Road 65 toll express lanes. As I told you, we are moving forward with the pivot and looking at tolled express lines inside of the median of State Road 65. Rick and I are working together on drafting the RFP to go out to the consultant committee community to do a project initiation document. We have met with D3 leadership and technical staff. So we are moving forward with that, and we'll report more on that next month. And then item 5, CARTA board meeting in April, which I attended as an ex officio member. It's important to know that CARTA did adopt regional toll policies. That's important because of item 4. If we were to move forward with tolling and if we were going to become a member of CARTA, some of these toll policies would likely apply to our project. The two that you should know about is that CARTA will be looking to toll YOLO 80 with a 24/7 operation, so it won't be 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then 3 to 7 like HOV declaration is right now. It would be 24/7. And probably most importantly is they made, and I think a very wise decision, that for you to be a customer of tolling on YOLO 80, you must have a fast track transponder, meaning they're not going to take a picture of your license plate and then send you a bill in the mail, which is really smart because that's a very expensive proposition and it creates a lot of revenue leakage on the back end. And just wrapping up here, just as a quick reminder, May is Bike Month, and so you will see Corey and team out in your community doing a lot of public efforts around that. It will start May 4th with the Auburn Bike Month event. And there'll also be some social media. And then, also with that, there's the countywide ATP plan that Corey's leading, and we'll also be out in the community. So if you see us out and about at one of your events over the spring and summer, come say hi. That's the end of my report, Chair.
Great. Any questions of the Executive Director? I do want to report on one thing I asked about at the last meeting. So this morning, as I was... Yeah, so the southbound on-ramp to 65 is closed because they're resurfacing, so somebody's listening, right? So thank you for that. That brings us to the end of, are there any other directors' reports? Okay. Board direction to staff. And then we have a number of informational items. Capital Corridor is... ridership is continuing to increase, and they now have in place new rates as of April 1st. So, all right, we are adjourned as the PCTPA board, and several of us hang around for the Sparta board. So, thanks.